It's Michelle with Ready or Not Prepared.
Hi, welcome to Ready or Not Prepared, where we talk survival, preparedness, and everything in between. I am your host, Michelle. So, I know you've been hearing about it on the news, so let's get into it. Today, the topic will be tariffs and trade wars. Let's talk about how it can actually impact you, how it can actually impact me, how it can actually impact the everyday American. So in this episode, I'm just going to take some time to just break it down as much as possible. All right, so let's get started on the basics. What is a tariff? A tariff is just a tax on imported goods. Sounds simple, right? But not really. It's much deeper than that. And that's why I definitely wanted to take the time out to talk about tariffs, because tariffs, as we see, can lead to trade wars. And trade wars can definitely have an impact on the consumer, or what's called the inline consumer. And now that would be us. Inline consumers don't pay the tariff directly. The country pays the tariff for their imports to come into, other countries, in this case, to come into the United States. But the inline consumer is more than likely the ones who pay the brunt of it, because the costs always get passed down the line. That means essentially when companies face higher tariffs, import taxes, those extra costs get tacked on to the price of the stuff that we buy. So we might not be paying tariffs directly, but we're definitely paying for it when we check out at the store. An essential rule for survival is knowledge. So we have to be aware of what's going on. I've been talking to a lot of people, and they're always asking me questions. They're just really emotional about the tariffs and what have you. And I'm pretty much like, the first thing I always ask is, okay, well, tell me, what are tariffs? Okay, so what's your understanding of tariffs and what is making you so upset? And I found that fundamentally, we can't necessarily answer that question. One of the most essential elements of survival and preparedness is you have to be aware. You cannot survive something that you don't know. And if you don't have some basic understanding of anything in any survival situation, if you don't have a fundamental understanding of what is going on, then you can't necessarily strategize for your own survival. And that's why preparedness is key. And in these situations, especially as we're talking about politics and we're talking about economy, we need to get a fundamental understanding, at least, of what's going on, and take away all of the emotionalism. You have to keep a cool head when you're strategizing. You have to be rational when you're trying to survive. And so I just definitely wanted to kind of put that out there to us. So let's talk about what the United States actually exports, because we're not just the only ones getting hit with tariffs. I mean, the United States is a big player in global trade. And the United States sends out machinery, medical equipment, aircraft, tech supplies. And some of our top export markets are Canada, Mexico, and China. Now, Canada and Mexico in particular are major trade partners. United States exports to them automobiles, machinery, agricultural products. Basically, Canada and Mexico are the top buyers of United States exports. And then there's China. China is really a huge trading partner with the United States because, they're both so competitive. I think this administration's one of the points that's being made is that China doesn't take as many goods from America. as America gets from China. It's not just about America buying from other countries. It's also about America selling to other countries. And when countries like China start talking about their own tariffs and retaliation, now we're talking about supply chain issues. We're talking about slowing down the flow of goods in general. But on the flip side of that, what does the United States import? Now, we all know, if you really consider your own personal spending and shopping, the U.S. is a huge consumer of foreign goods, and especially China. So to say that there would be some type of trade war with China is huge, especially for us as consumers. And we should really put something in place to strategize what that impact is going to look like. At this point, we get things like electronics, furniture, clothing, and you could get that from all over the world for sure. But China is that hub. We just really depend on China for like smartphones. If you think about it, your smartphones, your TVs, your computers. Mexico is another one. It's a big one. Again, these three that you've heard about, Mexico, Canada, and China, are major suppliers of imports. And so that's why this topic is so newsworthy, and why we should really understand it. Because again, it's going to have an impact on our everyday life. Mexico, avocados is the first thing that you think about, because that's one of the biggest headlines. It's like, your avocados are going to go up. We definitely get a lot of produce from Mexico. You get your, as I stated, you get your avocado, you get your bell peppers, cucumbers, squash. Now, the United States grows some things in some of our climate-ready places, California, Florida, of course, but we really have to expect that we will see the impact of this in the grocery stores. So just a random list of what might actually cost more. First, cars. Tariffs can definitely increase the price of cars. And that is because the price of cars pass through U.S., Canadian, and Mexican borders before they can be assembled. Like all of these different parts for cars go across those borders multiple times before a car is assembled. So when tariffs hit, what happens? The car maker will pass the cost to the consumer. Another thing that could be hit, and I don't even want to say could be, another thing that would be hit is houses. Because the cost of building material, the lumber usually is Canadian lumber. And with Canada talking about retaliation, the price of lumber will go up, which passes on to the cost of building homes. I think the National Association of Home Builders is already issuing warning about how tariffs could make homes less affordable. Another interesting thing, that when you do your due diligence, fuel can go up as well, because Canada is America's biggest oil supplier. And if the United States goes ahead and puts the tariffs on Canada, that definitely is going to push up gas prices. I think Trump threatened to impose a 25% tariff on Canada. And they're like, we're not having it. Because they have bargaining chips as well. Canada said that they would use every tool in their toolbox if Trump follows through. Now, one other important thing that Canada imports is electricity. And I mean, I think you might hear the administration say that, the United States doesn't have a shortage necessarily of oil, but it's the type of refinery and how they're designed to process. America's refineries are designed to process a heavier crude oil. Like it's a heavier, thicker crude oil than Canada or Mexico supply. So I'm trying to give you information, and I hope I'm not giving you too much information, but I'm trying to do so to bring about an understanding of the scale of this Canada and Mexico supplied over 71% of all of the United States crude oil imports. And again, when we're talking about oil, we're talking about energy and we're talking about gas. And out of that 71%, 60% of that came from Canada. And now that's compounded to some degree with the fact that Canada supplies electricity to the United States. Canadian electric power grids are connected to 37 major transmission lines, including New York, New England, the Midwest, California, and the Pacific Northwest. And I mean, when I was doing my research, I found that really interesting because, again, talking about preparedness, I think in the last year or 2 years, there have been power outages, running power outages in California. There were power outages, I think, in Texas. I think it was Houston. There were power outages have been experienced in New York. As I, keep my ear to what's going on, I keep hearing different officials talking about, I think even Trump said something about, the electrical grid, the power grid. And so when you keep hearing the same thing, even though it's more like a little undercurrent of conversation, in preparedness, in survival mode, it should alert you to do something. And so that's a whole nother episode that we talk about what to do when the power grid goes down, because that's a very serious conversation as well. But this might be a byproduct of it. Canada's talking about retaliation. Canada definitely supplies electricity to the United States. And so we should get prepared. So I've given you a lot of information, which leads to the next question. How do we survive this? First, definitely, this is about economy. And so we have to assess our budgets. If you haven't been keeping an eye on, your spending, where your money's going, now's the time to start. Things have already been getting expensive. It was getting expensive under the prior administration. Going to the grocery store for just basic things, prices are 2 digits. I went to get olive oil. Olive oil was, and I can't tell you how many ounces it is, but it's $30 in the grocery store. I mean, that's one of the other things that will be impacted because most of the oil is imported from either Mexico or Canada. So if it's 27 now, what will tariffs do and a trade war do? It would be wise in preparedness to stock up on some of these things. There has been a 30-day extension Trump has given to Canada and Mexico. I don't think through his discussions that he and China reached any type of agreement, and I think that's still supposed to go into effect. But so you have a little reprieve in order to get prepared. Look for alternatives as well. Maybe you don't get the name brand Dawn, for example, but you get something that's as effective. So these are the kind of moves we'll have to kind of navigate, and the things that you might sit down with your family to strategize on. I mean, like if avocados are too pricey, and they will be, then what can you have for your salad or your morning toast or what have you as an alternative, for example? Second, I think long-term investments are key. We've seen the roller coaster ride. I know I have, that the stock market has been on. When there is economic uncertainty, we have to figure out different ways to secure our future. Real estate is always a very good investment. Precious metals, definitely gold, silver. You want to get that for times of economic instability. That's always a go-to. And gold and silver serve as hedges. against inflation. Third, you definitely want to kind of get together with like-minded people, be that family, extended family, and figure out what you can exchange in terms of bartering. You want to pool your resources, create co-ops, in the community. Another thing to consider for survival is to build multiple income streams. Think about how to diversify your income. So we have to strategize on, again, other ways of doing things. And that might be trying to get freelance work. That might be learning a new skill. Just try to find options that can cushion the blow if things get, and I don't want to say if, when things get rough. If you have any emergency savings, because, this trade war, amongst other things that's happening, just what's going on with the federal government, the downsizing, etc. We're now looking at job losses. If you can't save, now is the time to do so, and create an emergency fund. If you start building an emergency fund now, even if it's just a little at a time, every bit helps when things get shaky. Last but not least, stay informed. Keep an eye out. Stay alert on what's happening in the world around you, especially as it relates to trade, especially as it relates to tariffs. You want to follow the news. You want to read up on any new policies, and you want to stay connected with your community. Because as I said earlier, the more you know, the better you can strategize, the better you can plan, then pivot. Like, that's my new 5-letter word for 2025. It is to pivot. It is to learn to be flexible. It is to sway a little and just kind of adapt to the times. So you might come from an activist kind of point of view. You may come from a political point of view. You may come from a spiritual point of view. But, there's a lot of talk on how empires fall and the decline. You have this president who's in office who ran on the fact that America is declining, it's falling. And I think if we actually just kind of think about it, many of us definitely agree. You can see the decline in the society on so many levels. And so that being the case, it does put you, it should put you in a mindset of survival. And in a mindset of survival, you have to pivot. You have to adapt. I had a conversation with someone the other day, and they said to me, I'm no longer comfortable. And I was like, yeah, you're no longer complacent. And I think we're in a time, I know we're in a time where you're going to be a little bothered. The time dictates it. We're going to be a little uncomfortable. The time dictates it, but we come from a community where we've risen above uncomfortability. And we have to draw on that same spirit, that same frequency that my grandmother's mother drew from. It's in us. We have to pivot. We need to move in our own best interest and come together and strategize what moving forward looks like for the community. And you can start with your family. You can start with your family and friend circle. can expand that to your neighborhood, and then you can broaden that to the community. We have to have some real talks because we're in real times right now. And the preparedness and the survival, it's movement now. Keep your peace, keep your calm. Just moderate the emotion to stay rational. We have to be rational to get through these very serious times. So, you just know knowledge is power, and that's not a cliche. Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to survival. Hopefully now you get a better idea of what tariffs and trade wars means for us, for the average American, and how you can or should put things in place for yourself to protect your family and your finances. It's all about being prepared for whatever comes next. And that's where Ready or Not is here to help you with. The pivot. If you found this episode helpful, do me a favor. Share it with a friend. Hit the subscribe button or leave a comment. I'm Michelle, and this is Ready or Not Prepares. And remember, I'm not here to scare you. I'm here to prepare you.